September 2015. The early morning mist hung heavy over Fort Sam Houston as three black sedans pulled through the main gate at precisely 6:47 a.m. Retired Colonel Frank Dalton was watering his prized rose garden behind his modest base housing when the knock came at his door. What began as a routine DNA follow-up from a decades-old cold case transformed into the most shocking revelation in San Antonio military history. The decorated war hero had harbored a deadly secret for 45 years. If you want to hear the details that mainstream media coverage left out and discover how this case finally cracked wide open, hit that like button and subscribe, because the revelations ahead will change everything you thought you knew about military justice, private first class. Maria Elena Rodriguez was born on March 15, 1951, in the heart of San Antonio's West Side barrio. Standing 5 feet 4 inches tall with distinctive amber eyes and a small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident, Maria had joined the Women's Army Corps in January 1970, becoming one of the first Latinas in her unit. Her father, Roberto Rodriguez, worked double shifts at the Kelly Air Force Base maintenance facility, while her mother, Carmen Rodriguez, cleaned houses for wealthy families in Alamo Heights. Maria's younger brother, Carlos, was still in high school, dreaming of following his sister's military path. Maria always said she wanted to prove that a girl from the barrio could serve her country just as well as anyone else, recalled her childhood friend, Susan Morales, during a 2015 interview. She wasn't just breaking barriers for herself, but for all of us who thought the military wasn't for girls like us. Maria's commanding officer, Lieutenant Joyce Patterson, remembered her differently. Rodriguez was meticulous about her duties, always volunteering for extra assignments. She had this way of making everyone feel included, regardless of their background. In 1970, San Antonio was experiencing rapid military expansion, with Fort Sam Houston serving as a crucial training hub. The base housed nearly 15,000 personnel, creating a unique ecosystem where military protocol mixed with Texas hospitality. Maria worked in the base communications center, handling classified correspondence between various military installations across the Southwest. Her dream was to eventually earn a commission and become a career officer, a nearly impossible goal for a Latina woman in 1970. San Antonio in 1970 was a city of contrasts, with a population of 654,153 people navigating the complex intersection of military culture, Mexican-American heritage and rapid modernization. The Vietnam War was escalating, placing enormous pressure on military installations to process and train personnel quickly. Fort Sam Houston, established in 1878, had evolved into the Army's premier medical training facility, but also housed various administrative and communication units. The social climate was tense, with civil rights movements challenging traditional power structures, while military bases remained bastions of strict hierarchy. Mexican-American families like the Rodriguez family faced particular challenges, often caught between pride in military service and awareness of systemic discrimination. The base operated under strict protocols, with separate facilities for men and women, rigid curfews, and limited interaction between ranks. Downtown San Antonio still revolved around the traditional plaza system, with the Majestic Theater and Joske's department store serving as cultural anchors. The Riverwalk was beginning its transformation into a tourist destination, but most locals still knew it as a flood control project. Military personnel often gathered at establishments along Broadway and in Southtown, creating a vibrant but sometimes volatile social scene. The day of the crime. October 23, 1976, 15 a.m. Maria Rodriguez reported for duty at the communications center, signing the logbook with her characteristic neat handwriting. Sergeant William Hayes noted she appeared in good spirits, wearing her freshly pressed uniform 8:30 a.m. During morning break, Maria shared coffee with fellow WAC members Linda Thompson and Joyce Martinez. Thompson later recalled Maria mentioning plans to attend a base social event that evening. 11:45 a.m. Maria processed a series of classified communications regarding troop movements to Southeast Asia. Her supervisor, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, commended her attention to detail. 12:15 p.m. Lunch at the mess hall with her usual group. Maria ate lightly as she typically did, choosing vegetable soup and crackers 2:30 p.m. Maria volunteered to stay late to help process a backlog of urgent communications. This decision, meant to demonstrate her dedication, would prove fateful. 5:45 p.m. Most personnel left for dinner, but Maria remained at her post with only minimal security presence in the building at 20 p.m. Maria was seen walking toward the parking area behind Building 1420, carrying her small brown purse and a manila folder, 7:35 p.m. The last confirmed sighting of Maria alive came from Private James Mueller, who observed her talking with an unidentified male figure near the communications building. Mueller was too far away to identify the man or hear the conversation. 8:10 p.m. Maria failed to meet her roommate, Private Sarah Williams, for their planned dinner at the base club. The discovery came at dawn on October 24, 1970, when Corporal David Manning arrived early for his weekend maintenance duties. Behind Building 1420, partially concealed by overgrown mesquite bushes, he found Maria's body. The scene would haunt investigators for decades. Dr. Harold Morrison, the base medical examiner, determined Maria had died from manual strangulation sometime between 7:30 and 9 p.m. the previous evening. Her uniform was disheveled but intact, with 3 buttons missing from her jacket. The manila folder she had been carrying was never recovered. Evidence collected at the scene included a partial boot print in the soft dirt near the body, measuring size 11 with distinctive wear patterns on the heel, fabric fibers under Maria's fingernails, later determined to be from standard military fatigues, a cigarette butt, Marlboro brand, found 15 feet from the body, strands of coarse brown hair clutched in Maria's left hand, her military identification, found 20 feet away, scuff marks on the building's exterior wall suggesting a struggle, and tire tracks from a vehicle that had parked behind the building, though the specific make and model couldn't be determined with 1970s technology. The crime scene photographer, specialist Robert Kemp, documented everything meticulously, though the film quality and techniques available in 1970 would later prove limiting. Base security had been lighter than usual due to a shortage of military police personnel, creating a window of opportunity for the killer word spread quickly through the tight-knit base community. "You could feel the fear in the air," recalled former WAC member Dorothy Price. "We all knew Maria, and suddenly none of us felt safe. Do you live near a military base or have family members who served? Can you imagine the fear that gripped this community when one of their own was murdered? Let me know in the comments." The investigation fell under the jurisdiction of both military police and the Bexar County Sheriff's Department, creating jurisdictional complications that would plague the case for years. Major Thomas Whitfield led the military investigation, while Detective Ray Gonzalez handled civilian aspects. Military police capabilities in 1970 were limited compared to modern standards. Fingerprint analysis required manual comparison, DNA testing didn't exist, and crime scene photography relied on basic camera equipment. The investigative team focused on 5 primary suspects. Sergeant Michael Robert Harrison, 26, communications supervisor. Harrison had worked closely with Maria and had access to the building after hours. Several witnesses reported seeing him argue with Maria 2 weeks before her death about work procedures. Harrison claimed he spent the evening of October 23rd at the NCO club, but bartender testimony was inconsistent. Polygraph results were inconclusive, and investigators found no physical evidence linking him to the crime. His military record was exemplary, with commendations from Vietnam service a private, Tommy Dale Kowalski, 19, supply clerk. Kowalski had asked Maria on dates multiple times, and she had consistently refused. Fellow soldiers described him as having anger management issues and drinking problems. On the night of October 23rd, Kowalski claimed he was in his barracks room studying, but his roommate had gone home for the weekend, leaving no corroboration. Military police found alcohol in his footlocker and noted his boots were size 11, matching the crime scene print. However, the wear pattern didn't match exactly, and he had brown hair, but it was fine, not coarse like the strands found with Maria. Colonel Frank Joseph Dalton, 32, base operations officer. Dalton was considered a peripheral suspect initially, included primarily because of his late hours in the administrative building. A decorated Korean War veteran from Oklahoma, he commanded respect throughout the base. His wife Margaret and 2 young children lived in base housing. On October 23rd, Dalton stated he worked late on personnel reviews, leaving his office around 8:15 p.m. His secretary confirmed he often worked late hours. No apparent motive existed, and his sterling reputation made him seem an unlikely suspect. Physical evidence didn't initially point to him, and the investigation moved away from Dalton quickly. Corporal James Andrew Morrison, 24, Military Police. Morrison had responded to previous incidents involving Maria, including a minor dispute with another soldier. Some personnel found his attention to female soldiers inappropriate. Morrison claimed patrol duty from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. on October 23rd, but patrol logs from that period were later discovered to have discrepancies. His size 11 boots showed unusual wear patterns, and he smoked Marlboro cigarettes. However, hair samples didn't match, and his patrol partner provided partial corroboration of his whereabouts. Civilian contractor William Bill Henderson, 41, maintenance worker. Henderson had access to all base buildings and had been seen near the communications center on several occasions. A local San Antonio resident with a criminal record including assault charges, he raised immediate suspicion. Henderson claimed he left the base by 6 p.m. on October 23rd, but security logs were incomplete. His personal vehicle matched tire impressions found at the scene, but the evidence wasn't definitive. Henderson failed a polygraph test, but legal challenges to polygraph admissibility complicated prosecution efforts. Each suspect underwent extensive questioning, but limitations in investigative technology and the complex military-civilian jurisdiction created gaps in the evidence chain. By spring 1971, the investigation had reached a dead end. The Vietnam War demanded increasing resources, pulling experienced investigators toward other duties. Major Whitfield was transferred to Southeast Asia, and Detective Gonzalez moved to the Robbery Division. The case file was officially classified as inactive in August 1971, though it was never formally closed. The last significant investigative activity occurred in December 1970, when investigators attempted to trace the manila folder Maria had been carrying. Despite extensive searches and interviews, the folder and its contents were never recovered, leaving questions about whether the motive was related to her work with classified communications. What time is it where you're watching this? Right now, it's been over 45 years since Maria died, and her family never stopped believing justice would come. Roberto Rodriguez never fully recovered from his daughter's death. The proud man who had worked double shifts to support his family's dreams began drinking heavily and lost his job at Kelly Air Force Base in 1973. My father died the day Maria was killed, Carlos Rodriguez reflected in 2015. His body just took 30 years to catch up. Carmen Rodriguez transformed her grief into action, becoming an advocate for military families dealing with violent crimes. She organized prayer vigils, lobbied for better security on military bases, and maintained correspondence with investigators long after the case went cold. Every morning, I lit a candle for Maria, she told reporters in 1995. I promised her I would never stop fighting for justice. Carlos Rodriguez enlisted in the army in 1972, partly to honor his sister's memory and partly to conduct his own investigation into her death. He served 22 years, eventually reaching the rank of Master Sergeant. Throughout his career, he discreetly gathered information about personnel who had been stationed at Fort Sam Houston in 1970. I never forgot that someone on that base knew what happened to my sister. He said Maria's death created ripple effects throughout the extended Rodriguez family. Her cousin Elena Rodriguez Martinez became a victim's rights attorney, directly inspired by Maria's case. Family gatherings always included a moment of silence for Maria, and her photograph remained prominently displayed in the family home until Carmen's death in 2003. The family established a small scholarship fund at Maria's former high school, providing financial assistance for Latina women pursuing military careers. The scholarship kept Maria's memory alive in the community and fulfilled her dream of helping other young women break barriers in military service. Roberto Rodriguez died in 2001. never knowing his daughter's killer. Carmen passed away 2 years later, taking with her decades of pain but also unwavering faith that justice would eventually come. Carlos became the family's primary advocate, regularly contacting cold case units and participating in media interviews whenever the case received attention. In 1985, the Besar County Sheriff's Department conducted its first comprehensive review of the Rodriguez case as part of a broader cold case initiative. Detective Linda Harrison, no relation to the original suspect, re-examined all evidence using improved fingerprint analysis technology. The review identified several previously unnoticed partial prints, but they didn't match any suspects in the database. A second review in 1995 introduced early computer database searches and improved hair analysis techniques. Investigators were able to determine that the hair found with Maria came from someone of Northern European ancestry, potentially narrowing the suspect pool. However, most of the original suspects were deceased or their whereabouts unknown, limiting follow-up investigations. The 2003 review marked the first attempt to extract DNA evidence from preserved materials. Crime scene samples had been stored under less than ideal conditions, and much of the biological evidence had degraded. However, forensic scientists managed to develop a partial DNA profile from the hair samples, though it wasn't complete enough for database searches. In 2010, advances in DNA technology allowed forensic scientists to enhance the partial profile significantly. The improved profile was entered into CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, but no matches were found among known offenders. However, the enhanced profile would prove crucial. 5 years later, Fort Sam Houston underwent significant changes in the decades following Maria's murder. Security protocols were enhanced, with better lighting, increased patrols, and stricter access controls. The communication building where Maria worked was demolished in 1985, replaced by a modern facility with advanced security features. San Antonio itself transformed dramatically, growing from a mid-sized military town to a major metropolitan area with over 1.4 million residents by 2015. The West Side barrio where Maria grew up experienced gentrification, with many original families displaced by rising property values. However, the community maintained strong traditions of military service and family loyalty. Local law enforcement agencies developed specialized cold case units, partly in response to cases like Maria's. The Bexar County Sheriff's Department established formal protocols for evidence preservation and periodic case reviews, ensuring that unsolved crimes wouldn't be forgotten. What's the weather like where you are right now? I'm thinking about how time changes everything around us, but some families live in a permanent winter of grief until justice finally comes. On September 12, 2015, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Frank Dalton's grandson, Kevin Dalton, submitted his DNA to a genealogy website as part of a family history project. The genetic profile was automatically cross-referenced with law enforcement databases, triggering an alert in the Rodriguez case. Cold case detective Michelle Torres received the notification on a quiet Tuesday morning. The familial DNA match wasn't perfect, but it was strong enough to suggest a close relative of Kevin Dalton might be connected to the 1970 murder. Further investigation revealed that Kevin's grandfather, Frank Dalton, had been stationed at Fort Sam Houston during the relevant time period. Detective Torres immediately recognized the name from the original case files. Frank Dalton had been interviewed as a routine matter in 1970, but was never considered a serious suspect. The detective began building a case for obtaining a direct DNA sample from the now-retired colonel. The DNA analysis that cracked Maria's case relied on short tandem repeat, STR analysis, a technique that examines specific locations on chromosomes where DNA sequences repeat. Dr. Sarah Chen, the forensic scientist who analyzed the samples, explained, "We're looking at 13 core STR markers that create a unique genetic fingerprint. The odds of two unrelated individuals sharing the same STR profile at all 13 markers are approximately 1 in 1 billion. Modern DNA analysis differs dramatically from earlier methods. In the 1990s, we needed blood or semen samples the size of a quarter," Dr. Chen noted. "Now we can develop profiles from just a few cells, even after decades of degradation." The process involves extracting DNA from preserved evidence, amplifying specific genetic markers using polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and then analyzing the results using capillary electrophoresis. The entire process, which once took weeks, can now be completed in hours. Familial DNA searching, the technique that identified Frank Dalton, compares crime scene DNA to genetic profiles in databases, looking for partial matches that might indicate relatives of the perpetrator. It's like finding genetic cousins who share enough DNA markers to suggest a family connection, explained Dr. Michael Roberts, director of the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory. Frank Joseph Dalton emerged as the primary suspect through the genetic evidence, but his background made the revelation particularly shocking. Born in 1938 in Oklahoma, Dalton had enlisted in the Army in 1956 and served with distinction in Korea. By 1970, he was a rising star in the military hierarchy, known for his organizational skills and dedication to duty. During the murder period, Dalton was 32 years old, married to Margaret Dalton, and father to 2 young children. His military record was exemplary, with commendations for leadership and integrity. After leaving Fort Sam Houston in 1972, he served at various installations, eventually retiring as a full colonel in 1986. Dalton's post-military life seemed equally admirable. He earned a master's degree in public administration, worked for the Veterans Administration, and volunteered with various veterans organizations. He served on the board of directors for a homeless shelter and was active in his church. Nothing in his public persona suggested capability for murder. The connection to Maria Rodriguez's case had been overlooked in 1970 because Dalton seemed to have no motive and a solid alibi. His position as a base operations officer gave him legitimate reasons to work late hours, and his reputation made him seem above suspicion. Like this video, if you're finding this as shocking as I am, because what we're about to discover about Dalton's double life will make your skin crawl. Investigation into Frank Dalton's activities following Maria's murder revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that had gone unnoticed for decades. Military records showed that Dalton had specifically requested assignments that involved interaction with female personnel, often volunteering for duties that weren't part of his normal responsibilities. At Fort Hood from 1975 to 1978, Dalton had been the subject of 2 informal complaints from female soldiers regarding inappropriate behavior, but both complaints were handled administratively and never resulted in formal charges. The military's culture in the 1970s often dismissed such complaints as personality conflicts or misunderstandings. During his assignment in Germany from 1979 to 1982, Dalton volunteered to counsel soldiers dealing with personal problems, a role that gave him access to vulnerable individuals. Former colleagues remembered him as particularly interested in cases involving young female soldiers experiencing difficulties. Perhaps most disturbing was Dalton's behavior toward the Rodriguez family following Maria's murder. In 1971, he attended a memorial service held on the base, expressing sympathy to Carmen Rodriguez and offering to help with any needs the family might have. He seemed so kind and concerned, Carlos Rodriguez recalled. He told my mother that he would personally ensure Maria's case was never forgotten. Over the years, Dalton maintained periodic contact with the Rodriguez family, sending cards on Maria's birthday and the anniversary of her death. He attended Carmen Rodriguez's funeral in 2003, serving as an honorary pallbearer and delivering a speech about Maria's service to her country. Forensic psychologist Dr. Amanda Foster analyzed Dalton's behavior pattern. This type of ongoing contact with victims' families is consistent with certain types of psychopathic personalities who derive satisfaction from witnessing their victims' ongoing suffering. It allows them to relive the crime while maintaining a facade of respectability. Dalton's personnel files revealed requests for assignments involving female soldiers far beyond what his rank and specialty would normally require. He volunteered for committees addressing women's issues in the military, served as a mentor in programs for female officers, and consistently sought roles that provided access to personal information about female personnel. His post-retirement activities followed similar patterns. Dalton volunteered at a crisis center, where he specifically requested to counsel young women. He served on boards of organizations supporting military families, always showing particular interest in cases involving single mothers or widows. Frank had this way of inserting himself into situations where he could be close to women who were vulnerable or grieving, observed Dr. Foster. It's a classic pattern among certain types of predators who use positions of authority and trust to access victims. On September 15, 2015, at 6:47 a.m., investigators executed a search warrant at Frank Dalton's residence in Universal City, Texas. The retired colonel was in his kitchen drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when Detective Torres knocked on his door. His first words were reportedly, "I've been expecting this day for 45 years." The search of Dalton's home revealed a disturbing collection of materials related to Maria Rodriguez and other young women. Hidden in a locked filing cabinet in his study, investigators found newspaper clippings about Maria's case, photographs from her memorial services, and copies of letters he had sent to the Rodriguez family over the years. Most damning was a handwritten journal spanning decades, in which Dalton detailed his thoughts about Maria and other women he had encountered throughout his military career. The journal contained explicit descriptions of violent fantasies and showed clear knowledge of details about Maria's murder that had never been released to the public. DNA evidence collected from Dalton's personal items definitively matched the biological evidence found at the 1970 crime scene. Hair samples, saliva from drinking glasses, and skin cells from his clothing all confirmed his presence at the scene of Maria's murder. News of Frank Dalton's arrest sent shockwaves through both the military and civilian communities of San Antonio. Many people had known Dalton as a respected veteran and community volunteer, making it difficult to accept his guilt. "I worked with Frank for 15 years at the VA," said former colleague Janet Morrison. "He was always professional, always helpful. I trusted him completely. It makes you question everything you think you know about people." Dalton's neighbors in Universal City expressed similar disbelief. "He was the perfect neighbor," said Mary Patterson, who lived next door for 12 years. "He brought in our mail when we were out of town, helped with yard work, never caused any problems. This has to be some kind of mistake." The revelation divided the community between those who refused to believe the evidence and those who felt betrayed by Dalton's decades of deception. Support groups formed for people struggling to reconcile their memories of Dalton with his crimes. Veterans organizations grappled with how to handle Dalton's previous involvement and contributions. Several groups returned donations he had made and removed his name from honorary plaques and awards. What's your theory about how someone can live such a convincing double life for so long? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Frank Dalton's trial began on March 15, 2016, exactly 65 years after Maria Rodriguez's birth. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rebecca Martinez, built their case primarily on DNA evidence, Dalton's journal entries, and his pattern of behavior over the decades following the murder. Key testimony came from Dr. Sarah Chen, who explained the DNA analysis in terms the jury could understand. The genetic profile from the crime scene matches Mr. Dalton's DNA at all 13 core markers, she testified. The probability of this being a coincidence is less than 1 in 1 billion. Forensic psychologist Dr. Amanda Foster testified about Dalton's behavioral patterns, explaining how his continued contact with the Rodriguez family and his career choices were consistent with a perpetrator who derived ongoing satisfaction from his crime. Carlos Rodriguez delivered victim impact testimony that left the courtroom in tears. "For 45 years, this man pretended to care about my family, while knowing he was the one who destroyed our lives," he said. "He attended my mother's funeral and watched her suffer, knowing he could have ended her pain with the truth." Defense attorney Robert Chen attempted to challenge the DNA evidence and suggested that Dalton's journal entries were fictional, but the overwhelming scientific evidence and behavioral pattern made their task nearly impossible. Throughout the trial, Dalton showed little emotion, occasionally taking notes but never displaying remorse. He declined to testify in his own defense and offered no explanation for his actions. On April 22, 2016, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. Judge Patricia Alvarez sentenced Dalton to life in prison without possibility of parole, noting that his decades of deception demonstrated a complete lack of remorse or rehabilitation potential. Mr. Dalton, you not only took Maria Rodriguez's life, Judge Alvarez said during sentencing, you spent 45 years torturing her family by pretending to share their grief while knowing you were responsible for their pain. Frank Dalton's conviction brought closure to the Rodriguez family, but also raised broader questions about military culture and the handling of violent crimes on military installations. The case prompted reviews of cold case procedures and evidence preservation protocols across multiple agencies. The Department of Defense implemented new training programs for military police investigating violent crimes, emphasizing the importance of thorough suspect background checks and the potential for respected personnel to commit serious crimes. Maria Rodriguez's legacy lives on through the Scholarship Fund, established in her name, which has now assisted over 100 young Latina women in pursuing military careers. The fund was expanded following Dalton's conviction, with donations pouring in from across the country. Carlos Rodriguez, now 73, became an advocate for cold case investigations and DNA testing. Maria's case proves that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied, he said. Every family deserves to know the truth, no matter how long it takes. The case also highlighted the importance of genetic genealogy in solving cold cases, leading to increased funding for DNA testing and database expansion. Maria's case became a model for other agencies dealing with decades-old unsolved murders. Fort Sam Houston established a memorial garden in Maria's honor, with a plaque recognizing her service and sacrifice. The memorial serves as a reminder that military service members deserve protection and justice, regardless of their rank or background. Frank Dalton died in prison on January 8, 2019, taking with him any additional secrets about other potential victims. His death brought a final chapter to Maria Rodriguez's case, but her legacy continues to inspire others, fighting for justice and equality in military service. This case shows us that truth has a way of surfacing, even after decades of deception and cover-up. If this story moved you, please subscribe to hear about other cold cases that have finally found resolution through modern forensic science. Share this video with others who believe that every victim deserves justice, no matter how long it takes. What other cold cases do you think could be solved with today's technology? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and remember that somewhere, another family is still waiting for answers that DNA evidence might finally provide.